Welcome back, everyone, to the Quakesaholics. My name is Kevin. Today I'm joined with Luis and Miriam. Yesterday was Thanksgiving. Today is Black Friday. The Quakes did a little thank you post with their recent roster moves. I personally have not seen the changes to the roster. Luis has. He messaged us earlier today. So we decided we'd do sort of a live reaction to see who made the cut and who's moving on for the 2025 season. Anything y'all want to say before we get into it?
No, I'm just excited to see what you guys will say. This is how I found out first.
All right, first post,
thing on my feed. Yeah, wow. This is exactly what happened to me.
Okay, so do you want us to go side by side, or is there a link in the bio that you'd rather us go
I think
through?
side by side would be good.
So all the players are in these slides?
Yes.
Okay. All right, end of season roster moves. This was posted 10 hours ago. Let's see. First one. Re-signed Preston Judd.
Okay, nice.
An option exercised on Daniel Muni, Jamar Ricketts, and Useni Buddha. So the option is just that their contract has like a plus 1 year, and if the Quakes want to keep them for an extra year, that's what the option means, right?
Yeah, that was my interpretation as well.
So this means that they opted into another year of
correct.
Contract. Okay.
And I think with the option exercised, it's only the club's decision, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The club's decision. Interesting.
Yes.
With that in mind, there's one that definitely stands out to me because this player had not been seen all of last season, but I think you did mention he had an injury, right? Which is Jamar Ricketts.
Yeah, Jamar Ricketts did have an injury. I don't know if it was a full year.
He played like a few games and then he got injured, ankle sprain. And then he played at the very end of the season, I think, for Town FC. But yeah, I mean, he's young, so like, I feel like he was always going to get exercised.
Yeah, and I think also part of this conversation is money is a factor. So let me pull up the actual salaries for these players. Okay, so first one, right, it was Preston Judd. So Judd, okay, it's like 90,000 a year. That's reasonable. Daniel, I think Daniel was 425. Okay, that makes sense though. Like Daniel is Daniel. Like I don't know why I even checked the price. Like this is a lock in. Like he has to play. Daniel Muni, I think it's also in that. These are the players that are on the lower side. Yeah, so Jamar Ricketts is also here. This is Muni. What was the fourth one? I already forgot. Useni Buddha. It's in that range where it's like, okay, for money value, it's there.
Yeah, and he's like a good option off the bench. I feel like he proved himself as that this season.
I mean, Daniel Muni is definitely a steal. We saw him start around mid-season towards the end of Lucci's stay. Was he injured? There were a lot of center back injuries.
That's kind of why I'm misremembering. He might have been, but either way, I mean, he ended the year really strong.
He did, which is what I was gonna mention. Like, had he been, if we're remembering correctly, and he was injured, like coming off of an injury and performing
as good
how
as
he did, I think that was.
And he's young too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember if it was an injury. It was just like at the beginning of the season, the center back pairing was Rodriguez and Bruno Wilson because we had just signed Wilson. Yeah. But either way, I think the main point is that towards the end of the season, he was a really.
I mean, we were talking about him as the most improved player on the team.
Yeah.
So
for sure. Okay.
Good moves.
What I'm excited here to see is for sure Buddha and hopefully seeing more of him. Definitely a player I'm excited that will be around to not prove himself, but maybe have more time on the field.
I'm going to be honest. I was
Preston Judd?
Yeah, I was kind of like, ooh. But then after seeing the salary, I mean, it's fine.
Okay, first column, 26 games played. What is this? Where are the goals? This gray column, one goal in 26 games. Yeah. Granted, a lot of those are... He's getting subbed in. So it's 20 games he's subbed in and he gets one goal, 704 minutes. I think this is the kind of concerning part, which Luis is probably referring to, right?
Yeah. But I mean, again, for the money that is being spent on his wages, it's whatever.
Right. And this is also isn't like, okay, his role is that he's going to be starting. It's just that
exactly. That's what I'm just saying. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for this one, or are we ready for the next slide?
I think we're ready.
All right, I'm getting nervous.
You guys ready?
I don't know if I'm ready.
I think so. I hope so.
All right, let's see. Out of contract.
Wow.
The gas. Okay.
This is the.
Okay.
Wow.
This is when you gotta take a moment.
There's one that's absolutely not surprising. One that I think was foreseen, but unfortunately a lot of
that
folks
we talked
didn't.
about.
That we did talk
contemplated
about.
On.
Yes, but I think
to see it actually
happen is a complete different reality that has to sit in. So
okay.
Thoughts?
I'm still reading this list.
No, we
so
are such fam.
Let's start with the out of contract.
Yeah, okay. So, out of contract, Carlos Acampo, Casey Walls, Michael Baldissimo, Jackson Yueill. I think the first thing I will say is that out of contract does not mean that they will not be here next year. This just means that they have not already signed a deal. So Preston Judd, I think, was part of that group, and it's that they reached an agreement. All of those 4 players can still be signed. There could be ongoing negotiations.
I guess only seeing that out of contract, and now I'm looking through the option declined, and my jaw is like twice as farther on the floor.
If it's declined, they're gone.
They're gone, which is.
Does that necessarily mean they're gone? Because option decline just means that they didn't want to execute the extra year at the current salary. But
that's true.
I think that happened to Tommy Thompson last year, where they renegotiated at a lower salary and he came back for next year. So
that's true. Yeah.
Like all these players could come back.
I will be bold enough to state that Tommy Thompson probably won't have that case again this year. Potentially. If we're looking at restructuring a team, if we're looking at restructuring a team that's gonna come back and come strong, especially with the new head coach that's in place, I don't think he'll be one to return this year.
Okay, let's go down the list. Carlos Acampo is a player that I think
it makes sense.
Really?
I would think so, because he was getting old and he was getting injured, and I don't know, like I think physically, like when he came to this team, I feel like his physicality was a big part of his game, and just seeing him decline, like knowing his age. It makes sense.
It's also a player that isn't bad but also isn't great, you know?
Yeah, and like we just saw, like for the money spent on him,
I think in terms of like prospects and positions, Oscar Verhoeven being a really big prospect in the fullback position kind of takes that expectation that we need our veteran fullbacks. I'm still surprised to see this, and of course, like there could be negotiations. Like I said, I would be surprised. It's like
sensible. Like you can see the logic,
right?
But yeah, it definitely is like, wow, like they're really cutting ends, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Casey Walls, I personally cannot say. I don't think he's played in MLS, so this is probably like a next pro kind of roster move.
Yeah.
Baldissimo. Yeah,
Baldissimo. We part ways.
Let's hope out of contract makes out for Baldissimo. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Best of luck. Thank you for your service.
Exactly.
Good
Salutes.
Luck. Yeah, salute emoji. Jackson Yueill. I think this one is one of those ones that I would not be surprised if Jackson Yueill does not resign.
Yeah. Which is what we previously talked about and Luis alluded to.
I will say, like, we were talking about this, like, coming to an end. Or, like, this is the most, like, the furthest he's ever felt. Or, like, the closest he's ever felt to, like, leaving, I guess. I remember, like, earlier in his career here, I feel like there were a lot of times where, like, he was talked about as, like, you know, getting a move on somewhere else. And, like, when he was still kind of in the national team setup. But I kind of see it as, like, another one of those where it's, like, for both parties, it kind of makes sense for him to move on. But
I think it was definitely written on the wall, just given like the captain armband change and just kind of subbing him off. I think the last 3-4 games he wasn't regularly starting.
Forgot about that. Yeah, that's right.
It seems like there's a push to get Nico on the field and kind of fit him in there with Gresso and Hernan, which I guess I'll save those opinions for a different time. But the short of that is I don't see it happening.
Not the right combination. But
I think a lot of fans are very negative on Yueill. I'm not in the Yueill hate club.
I don't say I love him. He definitely gets more. He gets scapegoated a lot.
Yes.
It's one of those cases similar to Okapo, right, where it's kind of like the end of a chapter in terms of looking forward to a potential team that could get us farther than we have before. Yueill is just one of those players that isn't like great, isn't bad. To your point, he is typically the scapegoat. But yeah, he does his job, but can we get better? I think we're at the point where we're looking at doing better to get great.
Okay. Option declined. First one, Jacob Jackson. Thank you and salute emoji. 5 conceded against New York, 4 conceded against Sacramento, and I think 6 conceded against Cincinnati, and I'm probably missing a couple more. Or was it? No, sorry, 6 against LAFC.
I don't know if he was in goal for Cincinnati, but
either way, there was like a month stretch where we conceded like 30 goals.
I heard his average on football was like 4.7 or something.
Yeah.
Like that. I knew kids with higher GPAs in high school, so that does not bode well.
And like all those goals conceded isn't just the fault on Jacob Jackson, but I think my association is like the worst parts of the season were with him in goal, and I mean there's so many factors, but yeah, I think Daniel is the starter, but yeah, we also had a lot of goalies. The next one, option declined, JT Marcinkowski, is a crazy one to me.
I think if there was one player from the declined that fits that example you said, or that like hypothetical you said of someone possibly getting renegotiated at like different terms, it would be JT.
I agree
on this list.
Because if you have both JT and Yarbrough, unfortunately, I think out of the two.
Right, but Yarbrough's leaving. Well, they declined the option on Yarbrough, which I think I agree with that a lot.
Yeah, I do as well. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that because we have two of the goalies there, JT out of two seems the more like prospect, if you will. To be
like better goalie.
Yeah, because sure. I remember it's mainly been because of his injury that he's been out.
Yeah.
Like, his progress, at least from the times we've seen him and like checked in, seems to be going really well. And I remember before Daniel came on as a sub for JT actually, right, when he got injured. But JT was doing really well too. Not at the point at which I think Daniel's really like launched, because Daniel's really just become like the solid and like the we've seen at the Chivas match. JT, I think, is a good runner-up to that. Yarbrough just hasn't been up to par with them, in my opinion. So having them both option declined makes me inclined to think that it's going to be JT, the one that gets renegotiated.
Yeah, I also think like you could also see it from his lens as well. I remember there was some talks about like he was like a starter for us for a while, and it was a goalie that we didn't have complaints about. And I remember when Daniel first came in, there was a time where we were like, is he really that much worse than Daniel? But like, so you could also see it from the perspective of maybe him wanting to be the number one goalie at a different club as well. And I know this was like, it was up to the club to decide, but I don't know. That's another way to look at it too, is maybe, the conversation was had, and it's one that could be for him as well, is what I'm trying to say. Possibly.
Could be. I hope this gets renegotiated. I think also just being a homegrown player and like with the years of service that he has, I think I have a bitter taste in my mouth with his last year being just recovering from a terrible ACL, multiple ligament injuries in his knee. So yeah, I hope he comes back.
Me too, for sure. Yeah. He's a good player to like have around that club.
Yeah. And if he doesn't come back, I think that signals that the Quakes are really trying to push Emi Ochoa and get him up the ladder in the goalkeeper rotation.
Oh. Could be. Yeah.
Could be. We've talked enough about goalkeepers. Let's go on to the next one. Tanner Beeson.
Indifferent, to be honest.
I think it makes sense. I think Muni's like meteoric rise, for lack of a better word, like plays a role.
We haven't seen the last slide yet, but I haven't seen it yet, but that signals that Bruno Wilson, at least from what we've seen so far, Bruno Wilson and Rodriguez are still in. So it seems like that would be the center back pairing, and then Muni like kind of rotating in there. Next one, Tommy Thompson, the original homegrown player for the Quakes. The day is going to have to come eventually, right? Yeah, I don't think he got too much playing time. Let me confirm that. Yeah, what is this? 85 minutes total across 10 games, 10 substitutions.
That's crazy.
How does the salary compare?
Tommy Thompson is 89. So it is on the lower end of the team.
Yeah, he's on the fringes there.
Yeah.
Especially for his age.
I don't know how many times he would be willing to like renegotiate and go down or like.
I remember we talked about this before. Like he'd be like an ambassador kind of role would be nice, just because like he's a good personality for sure. We've seen him on Instagram like doing a lot of things like at schools and stuff like that. So it would be nice, but yeah, it makes sense. Not surprised with this one.
I think Tommy Thompson is one of those players that's a really good example of creating a stronger team on and off the bench, because the reality is there's so many players, and like those players getting to like the quarterfinals, semifinals, or ones that have really strong benches along with really strong starting 11, right? There's depth to the talent that's there. And it's one of those cases where, again, as we're looking forward and wanting to build a really strong team, you can't just depend on your starting 11. And so you have to have a stronger bench. And in looking at that, Tommy Thompson's like a good example of someone that, if you're thinking of still being hopeful when you're down by 1 and there's like 20 minutes left, subbing in Tommy Thompson doesn't give you the hope that you're going to tie 1-1 or that you're going to win the match. So
if this is the end for Tommy Tommy, thank you for the masterclass performance against LAFC. I think it was 2022, the 2-1 win at home.
Oh, yeah.
That was probably the best performance I've seen from Tommy. That was crazy. I mean, so many years, and my memory is not great when it comes to individual performances.
Pretty sure he assisted Cal in his first ever goal.
Oh, against Galaxy?
I think so.
I think so, yeah. Yeah. So
he's been around for a long time.
A big part of Quakes history. All right, next one, Alfredo Morales. Both of you shrugged, so I'll keep it short. Thank you. Salute emoji. Next one. Jeremy Ebobisse.
This, I think, is one of the most decisive ones.
It's going to set the tone, right, for what changes are going to be made for the team. Based
on this list, our only 9 is Preston Judd, our only striker, if Jeremy Ebobisse does not come back.
Buddha, I guess, is in the mix.
Buddha could be there.
How much money?
Jeremy Ebobisse was on about $1 million. So also these numbers are based off of the last MLS Players Association report. I just put them in the spreadsheet just so I could search faster. So that is a considerable amount of money compared to the rest of the roster. And in terms of output, we can look at this: 6 goals. I mean, that's not far behind Pellegrino. Yeah, so it's 8 goal contributions in total. That's not really what you want from your starting striker, but part of it is the systems didn't really play into his favor. We know that Ebobisse has goals in him. We've seen it before, but I feel like with the change that Lucci instilled in the team, and then I think Ian Russell kind of carried out similar game plans when it came to the 9, it didn't put Ebobisse in the best position to score goals, and I think that's what we're seeing here. I think there was a lot of contention between Ebobisse and Judd at the start of the season because we didn't see much production from either one of them, and it just seemed like whoever came off the bench was playing better. And at least I always had the impression that it was a lot closer between Ebobisse and Judd, and then towards the summer I realized no, it's really not. Ebobisse is way better of a player than Judd. It's one of those ones again where with what Luis was saying earlier, I understand, but it still feels bad. So if this is the end, I think best game that I've seen from Ebobisse is the Chivas game.
Yeah, a lot of good moments.
Leagues
and
Cup.
A lot of goals against Galaxy, most importantly. So
yes, that's the thing. Jeremy Ebobisse is a big game player. I think he always shows up when it comes to Galaxy, LAFC, any game at Levi's. Goonies mentality for big games.
I think to your point, though, it's important to note that a lot of his great moments, maybe not those specifically, but at least ones I remember, were him coming off of the bench. So it almost feels like there has to be something up for grabs to incentivize him, because I think whenever he started, there wasn't enough given, to your point. Him and Judd being up to par somewhat.
Yeah, he felt like a very streaky player. He'd have a few good games, and he'd go 3-4 games without scoring, and then he'd score a brace, and would just go on a run.
Enough to almost feel like he's just keeping up the momentum to justify him being a starter or being a striker at times. So who knows? Maybe not up to par with what you need for a future team. A winning team,
Yeah, and for the money too.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest impact, I think, for the team.
These.
Yeah. Interested to know, Luis, how you feel either having a Ebobisse or not, will that be telling of which style of play the new coach is going to bring into the team? What are your thoughts?
Honestly, I don't know. I feel like Ebobisse, he relies on his physicality. He likes coming into deeper, which was kind of probably what you were alluding to when you were talking about maybe the game plan wasn't set up for his strengths or for him to just score goals. It'll be a lot more telling once we start making a few signings to see kind of what type of profile of player will be there.
All right, last one for the option decline is Will Richmond. It's kind of like Casey Walls, where we haven't really seen him play in MLS this season, and this just seems like an MLS next move, so I don't have thoughts on this.
Yeah, I feel like the fact that we haven't seen him kind of just maybe gives some credence to maybe not at the level.
I will say, though, I will give him a shout out because we did go to Coachella and we did see him play there.
Yeah.
We didn't see him afterwards, but I enjoyed watching him there from what I recall, so.
Yeah, that was the thing. I said we didn't see him in MLS.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Ready for the last slide, or any concluding thoughts on these?
So I have a question. What is going to be on the last slide if these are the 4 that have already been revealed, 4 categories per se?
Well, Luis knows the answer, and I can't think of the answer right now, so.
All right.
Find out.
I guess we'll find out. Okay, current roster. That makes sense.
This is good though, I think, just to kind of see like
Yeah.
update everything up until this point, and also kind of to see like some of the maybe Town FC Academy kids on this roster too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Miriam was just pointing out the Chance Cowell one. That is Cade Cowell's younger brother. We haven't seen him in MLS, and we haven't seen him on the MLS Next roster either, huh?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah. Hidden gem. We'll see. Maybe 2025.
I'm excited to see Paul Marie there.
That's true. That was one that we were kind of like worried might go, and I think we kind of landed on like we'd prefer him to stay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good to see him. Bit of a spoiler, but one thing that I saw in the comments was talks about Pellegrino.
I was about to mention.
And I know you have some strong opinions about Pellegrino, Miriam. So that's why I was kind of like, what did you guys think about that?
The ones that stand out though, that like if you see a name on this slide that you didn't see on the last slide, that means that they had a contract. So the only way that we're getting them off of this slide is if we buy out the rest of their contract or we sell the player to a different team.
That's a good point.
That's Carlos Gresso. That's
true.
Pellegrino if you are in the anti-Pellegrino club. Which in some cases it's like, okay, I'm really thankful that like Paul Marie isn't in this discussion because I don't think this year did him service, but I do think Paul Marie is a good player, and with the exception of this past season where everyone declined, Paul Marie has, in my opinion, steadily upped his game every year.
Paul Marie is one of those players where you feel a lot of confidence when they go in as a sub or if they're a starter, but more importantly as a sub, you feel confident that he's going to hold the fort down.
Yeah, he's very like competent, I think. Like you don't feel like the quality goes down when he comes on, really.
Two that I'm excited to see on there are definitely Oscar Verhoeven. I think he showed, despite the fact that he only played a few matches towards the end of this last season, he showed a lot of potential and someone that was really exciting to see play on the field.
Yeah, the stock is hot for Verhoeven.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that all the, well, aside from Daniel, which is just like a no-brainer, all the options exercise were players that you think have more potential to show and are kind of like you said, like rising stocks on the come up, and we haven't seen their best yet. So, and you know, kind of also looking at like the full squad right now, like you see a lot of young guys on there. So I think that is a good sign.
Okay, so we have 22 players left after these roster moves. With San Diego coming into the league, there's gonna be an expansion draft coming up in about 10 days. As part of that expansion draft, every club gets to protect up to 12 players. Players that are homegrown are automatically protected and don't count towards those 12. And so the Quakes already have 7 players that are homegrown. That's Emmy right here, Wilson right here, Oscar right here, Cruz Medina, Edo Mendoza, Nico, and Chance Cowell. So that's 7 plus the 12 protected. That means 19 players are here to stay for sure. Because there's 22, that means that there's 3 players that are going to be potentially up from grabs from San Diego should they choose to choose these players. We had the little game of playing, okay, which 3 players are we putting up for selection? Who would like to go first?
So the 3 that I have selected, I don't know that they would want any of these 3 players, but for me it'd be Costa, Grueso, and Pellegrino.
So you're hoping that San Diego takes Carlos Grueso to offload that huge salary hit that it's taken us?
Yeah, that would be a really good opportunity to potentially purchase other players for the roster, which if the intent is to rebuild with the new head coach and the intentions that he's communicated, I would think that's the case, and he would try to maximize the dollars that he has to move players with.
We talked about salary. For the expansion draft, I'm about 99% sure that if a team selects a player, they still have the right to renegotiate that contract. So they wouldn't just be taking on that massive hit and also taking up a DP slot the way Carlos Grueso is currently doing for the Quakes. Yeah, I think I mostly agree with your 3. I'll just give mine. I did think about Vitor Costa. I did think about potentially Carlos Grueso. I don't know if that's necessarily realistic for the Quakes. So for my last 2 picks, I put on Benji and Pellegrino. So Vitor Costa, Benji, and Pellegrino. I kind of did like a process of elimination. So basically anyone that was just re-signed, so like Preston Judd, for example, I figured they wouldn't try to protect that player if they just re-signed them. And then I was thinking, obviously, like the DPs, well, maybe not obviously because you just said Carlos Grueso, but to me it seemed like the DPs would stay. I don't think they would try to do that. It feels like a stretch to hope for another team to choose a DP. I don't know if that's ever happened in the history of MLS. That'd be pretty good for a trivia night.
It would be like 40 chess move though.
Yeah.
If we did that.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, can you clarify what DP means?
Yes, that's a great question. DP stands for designated player. There are different categories of salaries, and that corresponds to different salary ranges. I don't remember the exact number for DP, but just as an example, I think it's like 1.2 million or more per year. That counts as a designated player.
DPs are like unlimited, no ceiling.
So it's like Messi is a DP for Miami. Cristiano Espinosa is one of our
in the
DPs.
sense that they can get paid
whatever the club wants to pay them.
And there's only a set number of players that can be DP for every team.
Correct. Okay. There are 3 designated player spots. I think they're looking at revising that rule, but let's just assume 3 for now.
Yeah, so my vote for him was for his performance. Right. But knowing that, I think that adds an extra layer as to why they would probably want to try to sell him.
That's true too. Like if you have a player that is a DP and you wanted to offload him, it probably does make more sense to transfer him out and get some money in. Because for the expansion draft, if one of your players gets selected, I think you get like a measly $50,000 compensation in like salary.
Really?
Yes.
Which could be a player.
Yeah. So that's why I don't think that they would do a designated player. Yeah. So those are my 3. Luis?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I kind of was thinking about Grisso just because like that would be such a devious play to just get him off the books. But after what you said about like the sell-on, like the fact that we wouldn't get any money from it, that probably I never thought it'd be realistic, but once you said that, I was like, yeah, okay, that's probably definitely not gonna happen. So my picks would be Judd, Skahan, and Victor Costa.
I think there's a lot of room for growth when it comes to the midfield positions, whereas I think we have strong players up top that are reliable and consistent. Sure, there's room for growth, but I think it would make a lot more sense to replace a lot of the midfield positions. The reason I have such a strong sentiment is because I think the midfield makes or breaks a play in terms of defense and in terms of offense. I mentioned it before. There's a lot of decision making for those positions, and Nico lacks that ability to make those decisions quickly enough to create opportunities for those players that are up top. And I think that's been a big loss for the team in terms of creating opportunities when playing against a lot of teams, and also losing the ball too.
I'm gonna be honest about like the Pellegrino. I feel like he kind of could still be decent, and I only say that because of the player he was before coming here.
What changed? What happened, in your guys' opinion, with Pellegrino?
I think first year in MLS is a lot harder than people give it credit for. Playing in like a European country is just a lot smaller, so the travel is a lot more forgiving, and also the climate isn't as extreme. Like if you think about playing during the summer in like San Jose versus Dallas versus New York, it's going to be a very different experience, and just the style of play too. And also at the beginning of the season, Pellegrino, there was, I don't know if it was like a green card or a visa thing where he was flying back and forth to Europe because he could only be in the States for a certain amount of days. So like that too, and you know, with that probably getting his family adjusted is probably takes a big toll. Like at the end of the day, everyone's human. There's so many factors, and like we won't know. And I do think that in his second year, he should be a lot better than in his first year. But now, do we want to take the chance on that? I don't know. Yeah. If we're going to be reconstructing this team this much, who knows?
In my opinion, and if that's the case, a good opportunity for him to grow on the bench. Because I don't think there's opportunity to take those chances, to your point.
$900,000 is too much for the bench. If you think about like...
Yeah, no, yes.
This is our bench range. This is not a bench range.
Yeah.
Like you have to be performing. Yeah. Like if you compare like to other players in this range, like the closest, I mean like Rodriguez.
Yeah, and I
different position I know, but like
to your point, I think if he performs the same way that he has this year going into next year, there's definitely validation in the critique that I brought to the table in terms of Pellegrino. Yeah. Sure, I'll give him the pass for like all those different factors, but at the end of the day, you're playing the same position, presumably, and that doesn't change very much. Baggage is a very extreme term to use for this, but the reality is in reconstructing a team, there's a lot of changes that need to happen. And so if a lot of those players that we're so used to and accustomed to on this team are let go, although there's a lot of nostalgia tied to them, I think it's going to be valuable in moving in the right direction. lasting change, because at the end of the day, right now it feels sad to part with a lot of players that have been around for so long. But if the results come through quick enough, I think a lot of people are going to forget that and they're going to see it as...
like a necessary evil?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Break some eggs and make an omelet, as Luis just said. Everyone has to have a last day, and after a season like we just had, it makes sense that hard decisions have to be made. Luis, any last thoughts?
No, I think it is decisive, I guess, or contentious, but I think I don't disagree with any decisions.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. This has been the Quakes. Peace.